Howdy ESSM 406. Welcome to unit number 2. In this unit, we're going to talk about justifications for public decision making in environmental policy. And what we're going to use is the standard model for economics and policy. And you may have studied this in some of your economics courses. And what it's based on is what an ideal competitive market is. And one of the neat things, according to economists, about a competitive market is that when it meets certain conditions, that they're very efficient at allocating resources. Now, the problem for us is that it is very unrealistic to expect that all these ideal metrics are met. And so we have a lot of issues with environmental problems because of that. So what are these conditions that are not being met? The 3 conditions that are not being met in this ideal scenario is, number 1, that the information is all free. Secondly, that transaction costs are minimal. And thirdly, that all parties in the transaction are taking part in the transaction and that there are no power dynamics between the different actors. So as you can see, it's really hard to meet all 3 of those standards. But looking at an effective model that is really good at allocating resources is also really valuable. So we're going to look into that in the following unit. But for this unit, we're really going to focus on situations where markets fail. And we're going to focus on 4 of those. The first one includes externalities. And so according to the World Bank's definition, which we're going to be using, is that the consequence of an action that affects someone other than that agent undertaking the action for which the agent is neither compensated nor penalized. Now that sounds a little confusing, so let's think of an example. Let's use a factory. There's a factory that is putting pollution into the air that is causing health issues for people around it and causing global climate change. The factory is not paying any penalty for releasing the pollution. So in that case, it's a negative externality. The second one we're going to look at is public goods. This is another one that's very widespread. Public goods are something like education, it's national defense. Something that is something for the general population is a public good. The third one we're going to look at in this class are common pool goods. This one is especially important for those of us in natural resource and environment because common pool goods or resources are forests. They're clean water, the water you drink, water for your agriculture. Oceans. So it's a very important one for us to think about in this class. And then finally, this piece is slightly different than the other 3, but it's very important, as you can tell as I tell you it. It's environmental justice. So when we were talking earlier about information being free and there being no power dynamics, environmental justice is one that highlights how this can be an issue and may throw off what would make a perfect system. So one of the examples of that is I used to be a Peace Corps volunteer in Ghana, and one of the issues we had in Ghana is Western countries would come and dump a lot of their electronic waste into landfills because that waste would leach different pollutants into the soil and into the water, poisoning a lot of the people there. So that was an issue of environmental justice. And if we want to get a little definition for that, it's the fair treatment of all people with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental policies. Now, in subsequent videos, we'll go into each of those. We're going to start off with just defining what a market is, and then I'll give you an example of each of the 4 externality, public good, common pool good, and environmental justice. So, be back with you soon.